Okay, everybody, welcome to the Coach Chat today. Um, Another Wednesday. Lucky enough to have Mr. John Ortega on the chat hosting us today. In prepping for Coach Chat, John and I got to talking and thought it would be kind of a cool experience to give an example of what he goes through with an actual person, so we can see more of a physical representation as opposed to just kind of talking about it. So. Um, I know Randy wanted to add a few things after I make the intro here. So, just want to remind everybody, obviously our cases are going up here, California, regarding COVID. So, just want to remind everyone, please be diligent and be responsible in your lessons, and make sure we're maintaining all the proper social distancing and covering all the safety protocols there. So, um, in my travels, I've seen most people are doing a great job of that. So, just want to say thank you to all those people, and just encourage you guys to keep going. So, I'll turn it over to Randy.
Thanks, Anthony, and thanks everyone for joining in. Thanks especially to my friend John Ortega. If you folks don't have a question, can you put yourselves on mute, please? Those of you that are on this on this chat, please put your mics on mute so we don't get a lot of feedback and outside noise. So tap your screen. You'll see that they come up and silence your mute your phones, please. And then when you want to chime in to ask a question, which that's what this is all about. That's why it's a chat. Uh, to jump in and ask a question of Anthony and John. So again, thanks for everyone uh, uh, joining. Uh, with everything that's starting. In fact, I'm on going to be on my way to work as well as we're all getting back to teaching. A lot of us have already been teaching, but as foreseen, if we don't do the things like and pertain to the guidelines and procedures um, for this spread, we're getting shut down again. But thanks to what our golf courses are doing and our teachers, uh, we hope to remain open. So continue to stress that to everyone that you know. The other thing I want to talk about again was reminding about the PGA.coach, uh, the advantages and things that you can use from a marketing standpoint by becoming a certified coach through PGA.com. They're going to be really promoting and marketing that here in August with the tournament. So if you're not certified, please go ahead and do that as well. So without further ado, then John Ortega from Costa Mesa Country Club. He's been around like me for a very long time, teaching, coaching. All levels are players, all level of players from tour players to raw beginners. And so thanks, John, for sharing your time and taking the time. I know you had to make this time available for you because I know you got real busy yourself. So thank you, and let's hear what you got to say.
Okay. All right. Thanks everybody for showing up. I have a smile underneath this mask, so just want to let you know that when I'm on a putting green, I'm a happy guy. And I think if you can share enthusiasm for putting, that's a big part of people becoming a better putter. You're just enjoying being on the putting green and trying to hone their skill. I think it's something that people somehow or another don't appreciate. As being a big part of the game. They sometimes talk about it, but their actions don't match that. So if you can get them to start coming out on the putting green and work with some diligence and some intelligence, they're going to get better. In any case, we'll go ahead and jump in right here. So I'll just kind of show what I normally do when we start a putting lesson. I'll just have people hit some putts. Now, Anthony's already hit a few putts. Did you just shut down there?
No.
Yeah? Okay, good.
Okay.
We're good?
Yeah.
Anthony's already hit a few putts. And then I did what I do most of the time after I've watched somebody hit, let's say, at least a dozen putts. I'll have them set up to a putt, straight putt, that is. Go ahead, Anthony, go and set up. And you can use a ruler for this, or even a cell phone. Like use a cell phone for this. Go ahead and set up. Okay, stay there. I'll take this rectangular object, and I'll put it up against the face of the putter. Okay, step away. See where that's aimed.
Can everyone see that, where that's aimed there?
Well, he did a really good job this time. He's right here. The first time we measured it, it was here. The second time we measured it was here. What we're looking for is to try to get something consistent. It doesn't necessarily have to be perfect, but I like it to be pretty close. That means there's going to be less fixing. So, there are really good putters that don't aim perfectly straight, but they aim reasonably straight. So I'm not always about having to be perfect, but I try to be consistent, especially on a straight putt. When it comes to breaking putts, that's a whole different story. But on straight putts, I like to have people have an awareness of what their bias is. So some people will aim right, they'll close the face. You know, guys like Tiger Woods are a little bit that way. Paul Guaidos was a lot that way. Then you look at left aimers. Aaron Baddeley aims left. They tend to have strokes that look more like this. Right aimers seem like have their arms in like this, and they close the face a little bit better. So that's kind of the first thing I do, is see what their biases are. Then I'll look at to see what their stroke is doing based on those biases. And if they're not doing some things that help them correct those biases or manage those biases, I'll point out what those things are. So I don't know if that makes any sense, or if anybody has any questions or comments on what I just put forth.
How many of your students, does everybody have a bias? Do you find people who kind of come in? You ever find a case where they're coming in and they're great aimers, more of a neutral player? Do you feel like everyone has a bias?
I wouldn't say everyone. I've had, of all the people that I've seen, and it's been a lot, I'd say less than 5% are like mildly biased. So usually, yes, I'd say, by and large, yes, there is a bias. They're going to aim right or left.
And does the bias change? Can the bias change?
Obviously, you saw yours change. But in my own case, I used to be a heavily right biased player before I learned all this stuff. And then over time, I became less right biased. And recently, somehow or another, I'm aiming a little bit left, which for me doesn't work. So I like to have people stay the same, but I have seen people kind of shift all around. I think that's where they get inconsistent performances by becoming differently biased.
Right. Okay. So we did a bit of a pre-lesson assessment, and kind of, John, that's how you explained to me how you get into a lesson, right? So you're just kind of watching people putt. You're kind of getting a feel for what they're doing. We have the TrackMan here. We're utilizing the TrackMan here to kind of get a little more feel.
921 base on it, please.
In the case, like, not everybody's going to have a TrackMan to do their putting lessons. So what you can use in lieu of having a TrackMan, you can use a ruler. This, you can buy these at Home Depot for $10, and you can put it down on the green. This is my groove board that I make, and you put a ball on top of it. Either that, or put down a chalk line. Anything where you can see it on a video. And when the person makes their putting stroke, you can see where their club travels. And then, especially if you have like one of these things, either a ruler or a groove board, you film from here, and you can see, like, from the worm can view, where their club head travels. And then go ahead and hit a putt right here. Okay, go ahead and hit a putt. So hit that straight down the groove. But like a lot of people, when you put them on one of those like balance beams, they're going to be too careful. So you got to encourage them to just make a normal stroke. But you'll be able to see whether they hit it to the right or the left. And usually, if their bias is aimed to the right and they aim straight, they'll pull it. So you'll have to reconcile that somehow. But at least you have like a little bit of framework from which to start with. Because if you don't really have a place to start, it's kind of hard to give them any kind of tangible adjustments, let's just say. So we're going to take this away. Get another cut here on the TrackMan.
Do your black groups check in, please?
Okay, so this would be a good example because Anthony's a little bit of a right bias aimer typically. Can you see that?
It looks a little shitty here. Yeah, that looks.
Can you see that? Okay, so over here is his path. He's one degree to the right. Now, if you videoed somebody, you'd be able to see that slightly. But if you had that putt on the groove board, that certainly would have jumped out of the groove because his face was 2 degrees open. So his tendency is to swing to the right and have the face aimed to the right on his bad putts. When he putts better, he'll probably have a slightly right path because he's been consistently to the right because he aims a little bit right. And he'd find a way to manage the face so that it comes in aimed more left. So this is a really common situation for a lower handicapped golfer. I've had some that go left, but a lot of them go right for some reason. And so I just help identify that. So when Anthony's out playing and he has those misses, at least he has an idea of what it is, that he's probably aiming some to the right and swinging to the right and the face is to the right. Now, if he was aware of what was going on, he'd probably have a better chance of fixing that midstream than if he had no awareness. So I'm really about helping people gain an awareness of what their tendencies are, and then giving them mechanisms to make those let's say idiosyncrasies work for them.
So John, do you feel like, and everyone has bias, like we're saying, and without the TrackMan on the groove board or ruler is a great way to identify what kind of what those biases are.
Right.
What's your kind of prescription for fixes? Is it more setup based? Is it aim based? Both?
I usually start with aim. And here's the thing about aim and stance. There are a lot of good players that don't aim their bodies perfectly square. So I know over time I've been guilty of this. I do less of it. Trying to get the body lines exactly square to the play line. Trying to get the eye line exactly square to the play line. If that works out and that's clean and it's great, I'm not going to say that's not a good thing. But some people don't putt best from there. So it's kind of dependent on the player. But in your case, I'd probably get you to aim a little bit more to the left and to swing because you tend to have your path in your face aim where you start. So if we get you starting in a better place, that would be my first choice, and I'd see how that would work. If it didn't work, then I'd try something else. So let's say, go ahead and set up the one right there again. So just have the feeling that you're going to aim the club face just a tiny bit more left than you typically do. And that's probably a lot more left than you typically do. So let's go a little bit we'll go with that for now. That looks good. Go ahead and hit one from there. Watch out for that ruler. We don't want you to get that. Okay, go ahead. Okay, so right on cue. That was pretty good. Okay, so if you look,
You might need to get a little closer.
see how his path was 0 and the face was 0.4 left? You can see how Anthony tends to match his face and his path pretty well. I mean, the other one was like a degree off. Cool thing about this, I can call him back. See his face to path there was 1 degree off. That was 0.6, 0.3 left. That was a lot left. That was 1.2. But for the most part, when he's going pretty well, those two things match. So he's what I call a matcher. Not all good putters are matchers. Some guys will swing to the right and have the face to the left, and some guys swing to the left and have the face to the right of their path. But this is the key thing. On a straight putt, if you can have the face under 1 degree, aimed right or left when you hit the ball consistently, that'll be a good thing. And then usually what works out with the better player, that, let's say call it a quasi-misalignment, will be worked out with their contact point. So can you hear that? Randy, can you hear that?
Yeah, he might be on mute.
Okay.
Yeah.
In any case, so that would have been my recommendation to you, was to aim a little bit more left. But let's say you've been playing golf for 40 or 50 years and you have a lot of rotation in your stroke. So go ahead and set up to another one here.
Yes, by the way, John, you guys good?
Okay. All right. So the first adjustment I gave to Anthony, based on my observation that his path and his face tend to match up pretty good, was to aim a little bit more left. But let's say Anthony had been playing golf for 50 years, such as somebody like myself, and just their motor pattern has like a lot of face rotation. Like I rotate the club really, really hard. What I would have suggested for a player like that, I'll show you what I do. So I'm gonna have Anthony intentionally aim a little bit right here.
Try to hook it.
Yeah. And so my cue to him would be, most people, especially since his left arm has a little bend to it, would be to do this. Watch this. See this, a little bit of that? So this arm's gonna circumduct, or whatever you want to call it, like a little rotation like this. So it's not gonna do this at all, because if the elbow goes that way, the face goes to the right. If the elbow goes a little bit this way, I'm not saying like a lot, they'll tend to go left. So watch this. Your left arm. You're not gonna go this way, you're gonna go that way. Like that, yeah, but mild. Try to do it a lot first. You can aim the face, let's say here, and then rotate it. Now, for a young junior golfer, I'd never recommend that. But let's say you have an old guy like me, I would do that. So
you'd actually change hand dynamics in the stroke.
Yeah. So if you look at his now, I think this misrepresented a little bit, but the blue is his path and the red is his face. Now I'd have to say his face wasn't that far to the left. Actually, it was. And the ball broke right. Okay, so here's another thing that's really interesting that I think people need to wrap their minds around. This is going to be really hard for you guys to see. But on all the putts we've hit so far, from pretty much the same place, we had one putt break 5 inches to the left, and that one broke 2 inches to the right. So on Poana greens, sometimes you can get a variance of like, on a putt, how long would you say this is, 15 feet?
Yeah.
On a 15-footer, 7 inches difference. That's a lot. So I like to, impress on people, hey, if you're missing 6-footers, 3-footers, 4-footers, maybe be hard on yourself. But if you're having a putt 15, 20 feet that doesn't go in and you've done a good job, that's all you can do. The ball's out there. You don't have any control of it. So I think people need to, keep that in mind, because if they let a miss from this distance register as like a negative when they've done a pretty good job with their stroke, I don't think they're doing themselves any favors. I think good putters, they have like a mindset and a way of thinking about putting that's different than people that aren't as good. It's almost like with basketball players, guys that are good shooters, they can miss 5 times in a row, and then they're not afraid to shoot because they know they're going to start making. So I think people need to also get into that mindset where they can, practice enough. And when they practice enough, they see enough putts go in the hole. So if they're missing a few, they know that the makes are right around the corner. I think that's an underappreciated and undertaught part of putting, is the mindset of a good putter.
I think Faxon talks a lot about that in regards to, he doesn't really notice or care if it makes or miss. What he cares about is hitting his intended target and, good positive stroke. And if it goes in, it's kind of a byproduct of those things. And if it doesn't go in, and if you hit a good putt, then you misread it, or hey, that's, like you're saying, it's kind of out of your hands, right?
Right. Okay, so when it comes to, let's say if Anthony was a left aim bias player, so let's try some of those. Okay. So you can aim left on purpose.
Hey, John,
Yeah.
got a question. What's the recommended distances that you like your students to practice at?
Generally, I wouldn't have them practice at 15 feet because they don't have that many of those. I usually have them spend most of their time inside 8 feet because that's where the money is. So get really good at 8 feet and in. But when I do like assessments, I want to have a long enough stroke where I can see what their tendencies are. So for practice, actual practice, I would say inside 8 feet with drills, like contests. So they have something to evaluate how well they're doing with their putting. And then also putt like outside of 30 feet. So that speaks to 3-putt avoidance and, You know, if you get really good outside of 30 feet where, you know that you can make the 3 or 4 footers coming back, you're going to make a few more of those in your competition. And that's huge. So, you know, if you can make, let's say 1 or 2, 25 plus foot putts per round, that's going to be huge. You know, so I go inside 8 feet and outside of 30 for the most part.
So you were saying, John, we want to see.
Okay, so we're going to try a little left aim bias putter. So Anthony, go ahead and aim left. Now, if he was a conventional grip player, he's left hand low. If he was conventional, I would have him hold the club a little bit tighter with his left hand. When he's going through, feel like kind of like Stockton, where the back of the left hand goes to the hole. He has like a little bit of block in there. So let's feel that. You kind of push it toward the target. Okay. Pretty good. He's on cue. Anthony's a good putter, obviously. And that's another thing I would do when I'm working with somebody, and they're kind of real flexible in terms of how they're. There you go. So see how he aimed left, and then his stroke path was a little bit left. See, he tends to match things up to what his start is, and then his face was a little bit to the right, but it worked out, right? So he blocked. So you can see there's a difference between his path and his face. So good left aim putters, the main thing for them is they generally don't want to have the face too far to the right, because that's usually their compensation. But let's say if their face and their path was going to the left, that would be my quote unquote fix for them, or a thing that I'd want them to focus on. But in either case, we're just trying to get the face reasonably aligned to the target by the time they hit it. Now, this said that his face was 1.5 degrees to the right of the target. I'm not sure that I all the way by that. Let's just see what it looks like here. I'm going to play this. Yeah, slightly. It came out to the right, then it bounced left, and then it went back to the right. So the net break on that was 2 inches to the left. So it did come out to the right, which goes to show, he was within a degree or so at that length, and you can get a little, call it quasi lucky, but Anthony, he hits the ball in the center of the putter. Hitting this ball in the center of the putter, or reasonably consistent, I think is helpful too.
So give me an idea of that dynamic too, of toe hits, heel hits, how much that affects putts, and what does it affect? Is it more speed or direction or both?
I found it depends on how hard somebody grips the putter. So I like having people hold the club a little bit firmer. I know that a lot of the great putters like holding it lighter, but I think that's all relative too, because you can have somebody feel like they're holding, and let's say they have really strong hands because they've golfed all their life. So the amount of pressure they're putting on the grip might be considerable. But I think for most players that we work with, especially the higher handicappers, if they at least initially hold it with a little bit more pressure, the club tends to have more steadiness and not wobble. And if they hit off center, they're not going to have as much of a decline in distance. But like to answer your question, I think it's more impactful for the distance than it is the direction, because the club's not going fast enough. It will to some degree. There's some evidence that hit it to the toe, it's going to knock the face to the right, but then you get a little draw on it, and you hit it to the left, it's going to knock the face to the left. But I'm more concerned about like the distance, because hardly ever do we have straight putts. And if you're holding the club with enough pressure, you hit it just slightly off center, I don't think that's going to be a difference between making and missing, personally. I haven't studied that like in detail, so I can't say that definitively.
We had a question about tempo affecting rotation. So let me pull that up here from Dr. Worcester. How much does timing and tempo affect rotation?
Wow. Thanks, Doc.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, so I find for most people, if they take too long, their rotations are going to be wonky one way or the other. So I'm not going to say like if they take it back slow and they come through fast that they're going to get a right or left. It could be either. But Doc's pretty avid user of Blast, which I use a lot too. I just had a limited amount of time, and I only have time to use maybe one technology. And I think this one's the kind of the easiest to use and most impactful. But I think it has to do with when you do have these variances in like what your timing signature is. Like Anthony, he tends to be a little bit more brisk. So like his backswing is 0.48, and his downswing is 0.3. So he's kind of very staccato-like bang, bang. And, you know, you can see that most of the putts he's hit at the hole. I find people that have difficulty, they have really short, slow backswings and fast follow-throughs. So, you know, I don't know if there's like a correlation to, like, if you take the club back slow and then you start down fast, whether it's going to, you know, that you don't have time to torque the face enough so you'll miss to the right, or vice versa. So I wouldn't be able to answer that definitively, but I know that when people get better time signatures for themselves, everything is better managed, whether it comes to face rotation or, you know, distance control.
So as far as matchups go, I mean, I think what I'm getting out of all this stuff is, if you're consistent in what you do, you can kind of work around the edges, right? So, you know, if you're consistently a left biased putter, we're going to make adjustments to that. I mean, the difficulty is you see these guys on the putting green, and, you know, they're kind of hopping and flipping the club, and it's just really inconsistent. Give me an idea of how you work with people with a yips. I'm really curious to see what you do and how you deal with that.
Oh, wow. Fortunately, I haven't had too many people that came to me with the yips, but I have some things that I try to identify. Like, I had a dentist, one of my dentists, he came and he had the yips. He had a tremor in his right hand. So he had been with, I don't want to name the famous putting coach, but the guy was having him toss a ball with his right hand, and he was trying to talk him through, you know, not having this thing get all spazzy. And, you know, I tried the same. I'm not going to lie. I said, well, you know, let's think about whatever, like a waterfall, or I forget what I came up with. And then just kind of crossed my mind. I said, you know, why don't you toss me the ball left hand? So he tossed me the ball left hand. It was perfect. So for him to try to govern his putting with his right hand, which by the way, I think most people that are right-handed, if they can understand how their right hand can help them in their putting, that's a huge thing. Because I think the right hand and the right side has been demonized. But in talking with other guys that teach a lot of putting, they reckon 75% of right-hand golfers at least are powering the club with their right hand and their right shoulder. So it's a better idea to learn how to use that as an asset, as opposed to think of it as a liability. But in any case, so this guy, I had him just think of his putting as like a backhanded, left-handed putting stroke. So he just held onto the club with his right hand for some stability and hit his putt. So in that case, that's how I went about, you know, helping him. But I've had other people like this. There's a tour player that has a left-hand tremor, and I didn't work with him, but I suggested it, and he said he tried it. But this guy tries things for just a moment, and then he abandoned them. But so what I had him do, or suggested for him, was to put, let me see your club there. Where maybe you have to do that. We're going COVID here. Yeah. So put your hand on the club. Yes. And then put your hand this way. So, like this. You wedge it in there. Okay. Like that. All the way down. So it goes in like this. In between. No. You can no. So like this. Watch. Here we go. Like this. Gotcha. Like that. So you get the right arm behind the shaft, and then it takes up that space. So okay, now I'm removing his left hand in this case. The other time I removed the right hand from the equation. So I'm removing the left hand. He's just hitting putts like this. Wow. Hit a putt like that. Yeah, that's interesting. By the way, this is kind of my go-to for people that have like roundhousing issues. And I'll explain what a roundhouse is. That looks great. Hit a putt like that, back and through. Pretty good. Right on line. Try it one more time. Well, push down there to the right. Well, that's his classic swing to the right. But so I do things like that, and then the other one I did the other day, I had an 80-year-old guy that came to me, and his wrists and his hands just tended to get electric or spastic near the ball. Yeah. So when I was a kid, people that had trouble with their putting, they do like what Brooks Koepka does, puts their finger down the shaft like this. We call that the over 40, but since this guy was over 80, I had him do both. So then had him hold it really tight with both hands, and that kind of steadied his giddy up. So instead of going through the ball and getting spastic, he just had more tension. By the way, when you go like this, if everybody just goes like this, like you're going to shoot a gun and extend your fingers pretty vigorously, you'll notice that this joint becomes stiff. So if you do this and that, that's a mechanism you can use to take a little bit too much of this out, or what I just showed you, this one right here. So those are two things that I use to take away some risk. Sometimes I do this one myself because I tend to get a little risky in my putting. And then if I want to get a little bit more release, I have people just put their thumb on top like this and just feel the club head kind of pass. That's kind of like what Tiger does on the left to right, like that.
Yeah, give me an idea of, and we hear a lot of that, and Tiger talks about, wanting to release the club head, right hand. You always see him doing those right hand drills. I can't think of anyone who maybe does a left hand block drill, but do you have a preference as far as like stroke type, or do you feel like it's just kind of what each individual player feels?
Well, my personal preference is right side for myself and most of the kids that I coach, but I'll have them hit putts and just try to think about their stroke in terms of like having their left hand direct the traffic or the right hand direct the traffic and see what works better. But you can kind of tell which kind of stroke people have. When they're right hand this will stay kind of more within the confines of their body, and their elbow won't go like this very much. The people that are more left, like Rory McIlroy, if you watch him, his elbow goes out like this. You can clearly see the top of the handle moves more this way. So right-handed people kind of stays more at the center, like this. Left-handed people tend to like goes away from the center. So just kind of see what they are and then go with God when it comes to that.
And Dave Wircher asked another question. He asked about what's more important in regards to TrackMan and right. So you have X, Y, Z, which I think measures different things, right? So one's measuring the club, one's measuring path, and one's measuring ball. He asked what? Let's see. I'll bring it up. He said, in the 3D motion, what is the more important, X, Y, or Z?
For sure, the face is the most important. I think anybody that's studied any putting would agree with that. But I think the second most important when it comes to like what the club's doing is like the length of backstroke for the length of putt. So yesterday I had 3 really good putt players here. One that played nationwide back in the day, one who teaches golf, and another one who's playing Division I college golf at Santa Barbara, UC Santa Barbara. And they were hitting the same putt. And I looked at the length of their backstrokes it was about this length of putt, maybe a little bit longer. And they were between 11 inches and 1.1 inches. And most of the time there was 11-inch backstroke for all 3 of them. Now, I'm not going to say that everybody's going to have that. Like Anthony, if I look at his backstroke length here, it's going to be pretty much on the short side. Let me see.
That's why I don't play nationwide, John.
Let's see. Get to the strength, the stroke length. You help me here. Find the stroke length here on here. I think they call it stroke length right there. Okay, so he's hit most of the same putt. 1 foot, 1 foot, 1 foot, 11 inches, 1 foot, 11 inches, 10 inches. So he's averaged 11 inches. Most of the time you can see the mean is 11, right? So I think that's really important. Like time signature and stroke length. And you can get that off Blast. And Blast is not that expensive like technology. It's like $75 for PGA members. So you can get their time signature, which you identify like Anthony. He's a little bit more on the brisk side. You get their stroke length. And then you can also get the way they deliver the club in terms of like where it started and where it hit the ball. So if you see that their club shaft is virtually, plumb, and they come in with a little bit extra loft, that's something that I see with people that struggle with distance control. They kind of add loft to the putt. Most of the guys that are good, they come back to 0 or maybe a little bit de-lofted. Not going to say there aren't some that have a little bit extra add loft, but mostly it's at 0 or decreased loft. So you can see things like that. But back to your question, the most important, the XYZ, I'd say face would be number 1. Path to face is kind of as long as it's not egregious, like divergent too much. But I'd say, good putters, they're going to have a good time signature, their tempo, and also their stroke length is going to match the length of the putt. So club face, time signature, length of stroke. How's that?
John, give me an idea, and Heidi wrote in about the yips too. Is there maybe with short putts, maybe you get a player missing short putts, and maybe we're not yipping them, maybe we're just not making them, right? We don't have the confidence. Is there anything that apart from what we spoke about that you're doing differently or talking about, or is it pretty much the same throughout?
Well, when it comes to technique's technique, and you just try to get that, as well situated as possible. But I think they need to do things where they measure. Doc and I, we were doing before COVID, we had this junior clinic where we had basically 6 to 8 kids that were mostly new golfers. And Doc was really good about setting up these workstations where they'd hit different lengths of putts. We had lasers to get them aiming a little bit better.
Right.
So as long as they get those things, all those boxes checked off, then it becomes down to them getting really good at going out and hitting like a lot of different putts with a score. So they need to keep a score. Because if you don't practice keeping a score, when you play golf, you keep a score, right?
Yeah.
And so you get better at scoring. So I think when people don't really do those things, they have trouble making a transfer from just like hitting putts just for shits and giggles and playing on the course. So I think, I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah,
I think you got to practice with, it's got to be contextual.
Yeah.
Without that, it's like you're really not doing much.
I found out, the hard way, what pressure, what difference between, regular putting and like you're saying, just kind of going out and having fun and actually needing to card a score and no raking any putts in. And it is a big difference. So I think drilling yourself, and Heidi, that might be, so John, that might be something you tell Heidi is, you probably are a really good putter. You probably just, don't have a lot of practice pressure putting. And maybe when you get in those pressure situations, you're a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, and the other thing that I didn't mention, which I think needs to be mentioned, is a lot of times people don't have very good putters to use. So they might have a putter that's too heavy. I find that most people in today's game use putters that are too heavy, and they usually miss to the right, because this is explained to me after I kind of knew something was up, but I didn't know exactly why it was. When somebody uses a heavy putter, when they swing the club back, the face generally opens some. I don't care what kind of putter you have, a face balance putter, a directed force putter, an 8802. I don't care. The face is going to open a little bit. And then when they come in, they've got to reverse that, right? So if the club head's heavy, if you don't torque it enough, the ball comes off to the right. So let's say you get to the point where you start getting the knack for how to torque it. Now you get you're doing a ton of work.
Yeah.
So I think putter fitting is huge for people that are poor putters. Like by the way, if you guys want to get better at teaching putting, I would follow David Orr. He has a Flat Stick Academy. I went to that just before COVID. I'd suggest that you try to get an invite to that. I think you have to be invited. But follow him on, I think it's called Flat Stick Academy. It's $9.99 a month. You'll totally make up the money, like getting better at teaching putting. He's a lot more organized than I am. And he'll give you some good ideas about how to use framework to teach putting. And then on Instagram, Phil Kenyon. Follow some guys that teach putting at a high level. I do. I teach a lot of putting, and I think I'm a pretty good putting coach. But I realize I don't know everything, and those guys have some really good ideas. So, you got to do those things. But when it comes to back to the yips thing, there are a lot of different things that you can try. I'm not going to say that there's anyone that's surefire, but the more you've taught putting and the more things you can go to, whether it's the claw grip, some people, it's just changing the grip. That can be one of the things that you can do. But I think, changing a putter, or, if you look at some people, they use the arm lock. I think that's been pretty successful for arresting the yip. It's, kind of takes away degrees of freedom.
So we're changing up the mojo a little bit.
Sounds
like.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know. Does anybody else have any questions? How are we doing on time?
Yeah, we're doing okay on the
9:41
time here. Yep. How do you approach brand new golfers, young beginning golfers, with verbiage teaching mechanics in the putting stroke?
Okay.
Verbiage. So verbiage.
Okay. Verbiage. All right. So what I like to use words like direction, and then I try to correlate with other things that they've done, whether they've played billiards or they've shot baskets or they played tennis. You have any kind of thing that you can use, that's a language that they can understand. Obviously, if you start using words like torque and rotations and things like that, they might not be all that impactful. But if you just you just do something like, really simple thing. You've got a line, you want the ball to go down. You're going to find a way to make a motion. I like doing this a lot. On the frame. Just setting up to this, and I go like this with my hands. Just give them some idea that, because they're trying to influence a direction, right? So give them the idea, okay, this is the direction that you're going to go. You're going to try to make the direction that would look wrong, intuitively, right? This would look wrong. This would look close to the right. So have them do things like this. Put a club in their hands, have them do things like that. So just give them an orientation that's very basic. I think that's good for anybody. And then having them understand, did we get shut down there?
No, you're good.
Having them understand that their hands are directors. So if they do too much of this, that's probably not good. Do things like this that gives them an idea of stability. Palm like that, back of the hand like that, together like that. Maybe make it a little flexible. I wouldn't, make it like too complicated, but just little pizza slice kind of thing. I'm not really big on rocking shoulders because that makes the head move too much. But these kinds of things, you just get them to get their arms to go this way, hands to go this way. They understand how their hands, arms, and wrists can move the putter, and it moves like not on a direct line. Of course, I think they wouldn't be blown away if you said it doesn't swing necessarily straight. It might feel straight. Things like that. So just direction. Base is going to influence.
And then what about speed control or talking about speed? And I think it's probably a challenge most beginners face is they're worried about making it, or they're thinking more about aim, not necessarily about speed, and kind of all over the map. What cues are you giving them for speed control?
Mostly just length of backstroke. So let me see if I get another putter here. Can't share putters.
That's a pretty neat putter.
That's anything right there. All right. Just something like this is good, or Preston, that's another guy. Preston's putting. Preston Combs up at Don Parsons. Follow him. He's really good, young guy. He's we call it Sam Putt Lab. He's the Sam Putt Lab guy. But if you just put a tee, 2 tees, 10 this is the tee, 10 this is the tee, right here. And just have people, backswing to that tee, follow through to that tee. Just do that over and over and see what the distance is that yields. Then you can spread the tees out or leave them there and go beyond them. Just see how the ball reacts based on that. And everybody,
Check back in the window real
length
quick,
would
Vic.
change. If you did the same length stroke that I just did, you probably hit it farther because you have more speed in your stroke, right? So you just have them, it's like a ladder drill kind of thing. But I think if you have something, a physical cue, whether it's a ruler or your foot, take it back and hit there. We can't do that right now because you can't be close enough. But something like that, just watch the ball go different distances. So you can either take it back a certain distance and through the same distance and see if you can create like a similar distance based on that. So obviously if I took it back the same and went through the same, but I had more speed, the ball is going to go farther. So each person is going to have a different result from a length of stroke. So if you can just get them to do those things, it's like, I like to explain this way. This is a real simple way to explain it. If you're on a swing set on a playground, when you start out, you're like, you don't go very far, very fast, right? You go a little bit farther, faster, farther, faster. So if they can just, put that in their mind, go farther, faster, farther, faster. And then what ends up happening is their stroke takes about the same amount of time, whether it's a short putt or a long putt. Now, I know some people think that the stroke should take the same amount of time, whether it's a 3-footer or a 100-footer. I don't believe that at all, because I've seen really good players hit putts from different lengths. They're close, but they're not the same. But you just want to have a sense that it's, you're going to take about the same time. So if you're going to go farther, you go faster.
So tempo should be relatively the same relative to swing to putter length.
To your putter swing length. So like, let's say for you, like, let's go ahead and hit a longer putt. This thing's turned off. Oh, we're out.
Okay. Well,
We're out of that. So we can't do TrackMan anymore. Good thing I charged a little bit. But so if you got one of those blast motions, you'd be able to see what their stroke length was, you know, what the ball speed or the club head speed was, and then how long it took them to make their stroke. And you'd see that, like for me, I'm 0.58 on my backstroke and 0.3 on my follow through, 8.8 or 8.7 for my total stroke from back to hit the ball. When I go all the way across the green, I'm about 0.93. If I hit a tap in, I'm about 0.83. So you start to see those consistencies in different lengths. And so I think if you can train that, you take it, you put it in and you try it for a while, then you take it away. I don't think you want to live and die by technology. I think if you do, that's not a good thing. You got to just let your own devices guide you in the long run.
Yeah.
That's what you have to do.
Yeah.
But I think using them some of the time is important because then you get a measure.
John, when I putt, I really don't think about anything other than hitting at my spot at the intended speed. I do not think about stroke, setup, anything.
You shouldn't when you play.
My putter and going.
Yeah, and when you play, for sure. But I think when you practice, you know, you have to have an intention and execute that intention when you're practicing. I think if you want to get better. Now, if you're just dialed where you're already expert, maybe you get to the point where you don't need to do that. But I think for most of the people that we coach, and I think even really good players like tour players, they try to organize their technique some of the time, not all the time. So I think it's important to, probably a third of the time get in there and kind of see what you're doing, and the rest of the time kind of trust your trained instincts.
I love that. So maybe let's review real quick, John, before we hop off. I love that term, organizing. How do you organize priorities when you're seeing someone? So how would you organize my priorities?
Your priorities, I would have you make sure that you don't aim too far right, firstly. And second, I would have you, if you're going to be playing competitively, I'd have you practice inside 8 feet primarily, but I'd even have you do other drills where you do 3 through 12 footers and you keep score. I'd have you hit long putts and make sure that you can hit it all the way across the green and hit it within 5 feet almost every time. Things of that nature. So that would be like where I'd put your focus, like on your, like if you were going to practice something like we're getting in the box and trying something, I'd have you aim like on this thing, like do this right here. You have to aim straight at the hole. Go ahead and set up there. Put your club right behind it, like against the base of that. Do that. Just take that in for a while. See what that feels like.
So we're feeling what it is to have true aim.
Yeah. Then set up to that ball, like go over there.
Gotcha. Okay.
Get something that's similar. Do things like that. Get a putt.
That's a great drill. Now I can see it's just.
It probably looks a little left to you. So go ahead and hit it. And I think for you that would be helpful because like I said, you're passing the base 10 line up. What you could do for your students, go ahead and set up to a 10 ball again, or to a ball. I'm slightly violating the 6-foot thing, but I'm going to be down here. Go ahead and go ahead. Okay. Yes, take that away. Okay, see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Go ahead, step behind it. Pretty good?
Yeah, looks good. I mean, and if we have the ruler here, we can put the phone down to kind of compare, right? Or
I'd probably not have the ruler.
Okay.
So you would want a visual clue.
Gotcha. Okay.
Another way you could do it by yourself, go ahead and just start out the scratch right here. Okay. And just move the phone like that. Just move it so it looks straight. Okay. Move that. There you go. Put your face up against the back of it. And then you can move the phone where you want it to be. Just like having a groove board.
That's a great little drill. That groove board's pretty cool. John, that's your invention, the groove board?
Yeah. Okay, then you feel good about that?
Yeah.
Step away and see where that's aimed.
That's aimed right.
Okay, that's fine. Is how far to the right?
Probably 3 to 4 inches further right than I would want it to be.
Okay, just move it a little bit. I'd say that's almost pretty good. Right there. I think that's, well, yeah, it's good. I like that.
Because I see this coming off, and then it starts kind of peeking right. That's how when it gets close to the hole.
Yeah, so something like that, just something where you can check yourself quickly. And like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect, but let's say if you know you putt well, aiming a little bit right, let it be a little bit right. But it's just like a carrying a scale, making sure that you're about where you need to be for you.
I like that. Okay, let's see. Let's check the boards here, see if we got any other last questions. Do you recommend a specific practice routine for your better players? I think we kind of went over that, right?
Yes, I do. So I borrowed this from Josh Gregory, actually, but I had something before that was similar. So I like to have them warm up with straight putts, right to left and left to right, that are inside 8 feet. And so do that for about 5 minutes each putt. Then I have them go and hit the 6 different holes and do the 3 balls to each hole, so you get an 18-hole score. That's a really simple one. It doesn't take very long. That's a good little warm-up. You know, if they're not playing. If they're playing, that's a whole different story. Each person's going to have something that they like doing. I generally like to have them hit putts just to get the speed of the green first, and then hit longer putts where they don't have to expect to make them, and then eventually go into shorter putts. I think that's just a good way to go about it, because I think if you're going into your practice and you just start hitting short putts initially, you start missing a few early on, you might start ringing the register in your brain that's like you're not going to putt that well that day. So I kind of like to have them just get the speed of the green, hit some putts that you're not expecting to make, and then go closer to where the ones you're supposed to make.
Awesome stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, well, last few minutes here. Anyone have any additional questions, feel free just to chime in. You can unmute yourself and say hi. Give a minute here. Looks like we're good.
Hi.
By the way, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Anthony, it's Heidi.
Hi, Heidi.
How is everybody doing?
Good.
Great.
Just on another quick topic, is there any updates? Anybody has anything big going on with golf and, the latest COVID stuff? Everything seems to be going okay for us down here.
Yeah,
Any
great question, Heidi. Yeah, I'll kind of chime in as to what we're doing here with some of the partners that we're working with. So things are still going, and camps, we've limited the number of kids that we're seeing. Obviously taking all the proper safety protocols. I have been getting sense kind of, obviously the cases are going up. Some things are starting to shut down. I have been fielding a lot more calls. So we just sent out an email blast and just kind of reviewing what our safety protocols are, reviewing that our, campers' safety is our #1 priority. What we're doing, what the parents should be doing, what the kids can expect. I think more than anything, everyone's excited and wants to get back on the golf course. They feel it's safe, but they're looking for just a little bit more reassurance. So I'm not sure, Heidi, if that answers your question, but the more you can communicate what you're thinking, what you're doing, the better.
Yeah, that sounds great.
One last thing
Thank
that just came to mind. We've been working on a static, like working on somebody's putting stroke straight putt, that we haven't really addressed too much when it comes to breaking putts. So when you do like a clinic or any kind of seminar that involves putting, generally an hour is not a whole lot of time to do it. I know when I went to David Orr's Flat Stick Academy, first day was 8 hours, the second day was 6. So 14 hours, and there's more that you can go over, right? So this is just something quickly on breaking putts that I think you can do, and you can use the breaking putt to help people with their predisposed biases. So Anthony tends to have a right aim bias, and he has a right miss typically. I would have him practice a lot on left to right putts. Yeah. And vice versa. If somebody has a left aim bias, like we have a teacher here that's a left aim guy, and he asked me to look at his left or right to left putts, and said he struggles with those. And he had no idea that he was aiming left and that he wasn't aiming far enough up the hill to have a chance of making the putt. So I kind of pointed that out to him and said, because you have to work out something that allows you to hit the ball high enough up the hill without too much of an adjustment. So I think if you do things like that, that'll kind of gradually help them, like smooth out those biases.
And to that point, John, that's where I struggle. I tend to whiff the left to right putts. I didn't know that I was a right bias player, and so great information and a great tip that I am definitely gonna do. So
Attention on the grass section of the range. It's irons only. On the grass section, please. Irons only. Thank you.
Irons only.
Yeah. Again, guys, this is thank you guys for being with us. Kind of we wanted to think outside the box and kind of show you, again, a lesson in progress here. Costa Mesa Country Club is a great spot. It's a busy spot, as you guys can hear and see and tell. But again, thanks for being with us. And we look forward to seeing you guys in 2 weeks. Just to, again, reiterate what Randy said in regards to PGA coach certification. If you're not doing that, you're doing yourself a big disservice. It's a great tool. It's a great asset, and it's going to be an even better asset moving forward here once the PGA starts releasing some of the improvements and some of the stuff they have scheduled. So, John, is there anything you want to end with, or any words, parting words you want to give?
The only parting words I want to give is that, when you give a putting session, I'd like to have you guys offer them, like when you're talking about them, as training sessions. So when somebody comes for a putting lesson, you can tell them that the one session is probably not going to be enough. You don't have to phrase it exactly that way, but you should ask for like a reschedule, like when are you going to come again, so we can see how these things are going. Because most of the people that I work with that become better putters, they see me often. Because like I said, I've been mostly a right aim buyer most of my life, right aim bias putter most of my life, and recently I'm aim left a little bit, and I'm not putting as well. So if you have somebody that you coach on a regular basis with their swing, if you're taking over some people that you're coaching just for putting, like I do. I have kids that go to Bob Laskin, different teachers around here that they send me their kids for putting. They come often. I have this one kid that comes twice a week sometimes. So if you can start learning how to teach putting, or whatever you want to call it, coach putting, and encourage them to keep coming back, they'll get better, and you'll get better at teaching putting or coaching putting. So I think just the idea that somebody can come for one session and they're healed is folly. So I'd encourage you to think of your offering as a putting coach as something that's ongoing, and it's going to help them. It's going to help you, and as long as they have the financial wherewithal to keep up with it, you're both going to be better off for that.
You give them a good deal, right, John? They come see you.
No, there's no deals here. It's just me upping my education and spending my money on technology. So. But thanks everybody for coming. I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, thanks everybody. We'll catch you in 2 weeks, 2 weeks from today. See y'all soon. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.